political advisor at the European People's Party. And on behalf of the EPP, welcome to another episode of EPP Family Talks. Over the past several weeks, and now 2 months actually, it's been our pleasure to welcome leaders from throughout our political family to talk with them about the ideas and projects they've been working on, especially during this time of coronavirus crisis. This morning, it is our great pleasure to welcome Mr. Andrius Kubilius, former Prime Minister of Lithuania from our member party, TS-LKD, and the European Parliament's co-chair of the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. Mr. Kubilius, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us this morning.
Well, good morning. Good morning to everybody, and pleasure on my side.
We've started all of these EPP Family Talks interviews by asking a basic personal question, and that is, in these last few strange weeks, how have you been doing? How have you been coping and adapting?
Well, really, pandemics hit us quite heavily. I was, spending since middle of March my days back in my hometown, Vilnius. This week I moved back to Brussels, so I'm trying to learn again how Parliament is working. But really, experience of pandemics was very, very, very special. If at the beginning it looked like that, we shall have quite a lazy time, just, reading and writing and going around on the bicycle. At the end, it appears that all the new technologies, internet technologies like WebEx, Zoom, and other, technologies, they are creating so many possibilities to have very interesting conversations, very interesting discussions. So we became very busy, just jumping from one Zoom conference to another conference, from one YouTube conversation, to another one, and that's really opened a lot of new possibilities, which we perhaps will use even after pandemic will be over.
And for most of the pandemic, for most of these past few weeks, you were in Vilnius. What is the situation like there on the ground in Lithuania?
Well, it's not so bad. The numbers of infected people are lower than it was, for example, in Belgium or in other countries. The government, which we are on a national level, we are in opposition to the government. Government is trying to declare very proudly that they were very effective in fighting pandemics. Maybe, but from another side, in my opinion, sometimes you have benefit being a country, somewhere not so in the center of Europe. Being in the province of Europe, it brings benefits that you have much lower, numbers of people who are going, transit through a country, much lower numbers of tourists, and so on and so on. And maybe that was also the reason that our numbers were quite low. So we did not have such problems like we have seen in Italy or Spain. Of course, we had total lockdown of all the industry, all restaurants, cafes, schools, and so on. So economy perhaps will be hit quite heavily. Government is spending money not in a most prudent way, but that's a reality. So we shall see what will be really the outcome of economical crisis. And of course, we are coming to elections. In October, we shall have parliamentary elections. Before pandemic, our party was very high in opinion polls. During pandemic, government a little bit recovered. But I hope that we shall do in a good way in October during elections.
Well, we take good news also where we can get it. So the low numbers in Lithuania are something very positive. I know that Lithuania, along with Latvia, Estonia, recently opened a kind of a travel corridor as well. I think one of the first in Europe. So I'd like to move on to an EU-wide policy to ask you about now and to really focus this interview ahead of next week's 6th Eastern Partnership Summit. This is an area where you are very, very involved and have been for a long time. You're one of the most supportive in the European Parliament. You were one of the most supportive prime ministers of the European Union's Eastern Partnership policy. And I wanted to ask, ahead of the summit next week, how would you assess, my understanding is maybe you're very concerned about the current direction, the current strategy vis-a-vis the Eastern Partnership. So how would you assess the current strategy, and what can we expect from the meeting next week?
Well, we consider really Eastern Partnership policy as one of the most important geopolitical policies of Europe. For us, especially now in our region, that is the policy of our geopolitical security. Because, if Eastern Partnership countries gradually will move, to become more integrated towards Europe, if they will become, more successful in their economical and political developments, that will bring much more of security, first of all, to the whole region, and then to all Europe. And of course, also what we are considering as very important, that success, for example, of such country like Ukraine is almost the only one instrument which EU has in its hands when we are discussing how EU can assist even Russia in its positive future transformations. Example of success of Ukraine can have a major impact on general opinion of ordinary Russian people. So that is, in a very short way, how we consider significance of Eastern Partnership policy. Then, from another side, when we are looking into what kind of strategy and what kind of policy towards Eastern Partnership region EU is able to provide, of course, we consider that there is some lack of more clear ambition. What EU wants to achieve together with Eastern Partnership countries during the next decade. From my point of view, I would put it in a very simple way. We see that among Eastern Partnership countries, there are, of course, differences. If to look into each country individually, we see three most advanced countries like Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, which have clear association agreement and free trade agreement. There is Armenia, which is recently trying to catch up with those, most advanced countries. And then there are two special cases, Belarus and Azerbaijan, which we need to look into much more individually. What kind of developments can happen in those countries. But when we're talking about those three most advanced countries, my vision is very simple. Next decade will be very, very strategically important for those countries, and I would be very happy if at the end of the decade we shall have those three countries, brought to, the beginning of the road, which we can call the road of Western Balkan countries. So that's our view and our vision. And in order to achieve such a result, really, we need to have much more ambitious strategy from EU side, what we call trio strategy, how we can, keep motivation for reforms in those three countries, going ahead. We need to have clear vision how we can assist economically those countries, and of course, philosophy of what we can call carrot and stick is most important philosophy when we are talking about Eastern Partnership countries. So, in a short way, that's our view, our vision. We see some progress, in EU language, which is devoted to Eastern Partnership region, but really there is still too little geopolitical ambition. When EU is talking about Western Balkans, EU is using very clear language, and in a short way, I can repeat what I'm always very happy to hear either from Ursula von der Leyen or Joseph Borrell, when they're saying that if EU is not coming into Western Balkan region, then that region can be very easily destabilized, first of all, by Russia, or maybe by some other, big powers like China or even Turkey. That's very clear language, and then out from that language you can see very clearly what policy EU is trying to implement towards Western Balkan region, and that policy is of course policy of integration. When EU leaders are speaking about Eastern Partnership region, unfortunately they are not, for time being, they are not using similar language. That if EU is not coming into that region, if EU is not providing an ambitious strategy how to assist at least those three most advanced countries with their integration towards EU, that Russia will come and Russia will destabilize as it was always attempting to do it. So that's our choice. Now, in Eastern Partnership region, we can see very clearly what strategy Kremlin has, what strategy Putin has in that region. Really, the major goal for him is very simple: not to allow those countries to become successful ones. That is why he's using all the possibilities for destabilization and so on. We need to ask ourselves what is EU strategy towards that region. For time being, unfortunately, that strategy is a little bit not so ambitious as we would like to see.
I have two very specific follow-ups to all that you've been saying. One of them is about the issue of security and a security compact for the Eastern Partnership, and the other one is about the trio strategy, which you mentioned. So maybe, I don't know which one we should start with. Maybe I'll just ask you first about the trio strategy, and just ask you, would you explain exactly what this is and what this strategy is first? And then the second part would be about the security compact for the Eastern Partnership and what you see as the future of this as a possibility.
Well, trio strategy, we started to use that language during the last EPP Congress when we put special resolution on so-called Eastern Partnership trio strategy. And the whole philosophy is very simple. As I said, we see three most advanced countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, which has association agreements, and they're doing reforms, sometimes quite effectively, sometimes, lagging behind. But we want to have real implementation of the philosophy, which was repeated for quite many times in different EU documents. Philosophy of differentiation and philosophy of more for more and less for less. If the countries are doing more of reforms, then EU should come with some kind of new agenda, new proposals, new projects, how to assist those countries to move ahead. If the countries are backsliding, then less for less should have also very clear meaning, that EU should also react to such a backsliding with clear steps, diminishing EU assistance or EU programs. So that is the reason why we proposed to have much more specific assistance program towards three most advanced countries from Eastern Partnership region. And the specificity of that assistance should become closer and closer towards what EU is doing towards Western Balkan countries. We are looking into possibility to have something similar to what is called Berlin process, which was established, by German government back in 2014 in order to speed up the process of Western Balkan integration. And the whole content of Berlin process is really creation of coalition of the friends of Western Balkan integration inside of EU. So several countries joined that initiative. Several members of EU joined that Berlin process initiative. Second point, what we are looking for really is to have some kind of very specific EU assistance instruments. Some of them are recently, well established. For example, like special experts group for assistance to Ukraine, so-called SGUA group. We would like to see that SGUA group would be expanded, or separate individual 3 groups would be established: one for Ukraine, one for Moldova, and one for Georgia. And second, of course, we would like to see, clear evaluation of the progress of Eastern Partnership countries, even comparing them with the progress of Western Balkan countries. And I was quite impressed, for example, by a special report which was done by very well-known expert Michael Emerson from SEPS, perhaps back in 2018, where he compared countries from Eastern Partnership region with the countries from Western Balkans, which one of them, how good they are prepared for integration towards EU. And his conclusion was that Georgia at that time was number 1, even if to compare with all the Western Balkan countries. So that's really what we want to see in this trio strategy. We discussed our proposals very deeply here in the European Parliament. As you know, recently AFET committee passed a special report on Eastern Partnership future. So despite the fact that the title of trio strategy is not used, so as we were proposing, but there is a very clear language on specific strategies towards 3 most advanced countries, and that we consider that this is really a good achievement, which we managed to achieve during all the debates. So now we shall look, after the summit next week, we shall look how really to put into reality, into real steps, on the ground, some of the ideas which we were talking in all the different forums, starting from EPP Congress, then Euronest Parliamentary Assembly resolution, which was passed in December, and also, AFET report. We shall try to look how to make some of the ideas to become real steps forward.
And following up on this idea of the security compact, my understanding is there's a strong lobby for this. In your view, is this something realistic? Is this something member states are ready for?
Well, I don't know. We need to look into more details. What EU is able to provide in security area, but I would speak first of all that security really comes through integration, through real European integration. We can see from all the different experiences, including our experience, experience of Baltic states, integration towards EU is bringing not only successful economical and social development of the countries, but it also brings a lot of geopolitical security. So we can call it soft security or whatever, but that is exactly what is very much needed. How much EU is able to provide some kind of hard security, that is still under major discussions when we're talking about strategic autonomy of EU, and so on. But integration towards EU is exactly what is very much needed for security of the whole region.
And one final policy question, if I might. You are the European Parliament's co-chair of the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. The Euronest Parliamentary Assembly is made up of 60 members of the European Parliament, 60 members of parliaments from the 6 countries in the Eastern Partnership. What are your priorities in the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly? What are the next steps in the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly?
Well, we are really we put our priorities in a very clear language. During last assembly which we had in Tbilisi, and priorities are really what we call next 10 years strategy for Eastern Partnership policy. Where, as I said, we want to see that most advanced countries like Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, and Armenia going, not far behind, should have a possibility to move, more rapidly towards deeper integration. For that, we need to have proper instruments on EU side, not only, asking those countries to make reforms, which they need to do, but also we need to have proper instruments on our side. And what we are looking for, we are looking that, during decade till 2030, we shall have, several very important occasions, or very important presidencies of different countries in EU, starting, for example, from Czech Republic in 2022, Sweden in 2023, Poland 2025, Lithuania 2027, after Lithuania, Latvia in 2028. We consider all those countries, friends of Eastern Partnership policy. And if we shall manage to make some kind of coalition of those countries, which will be in a sequence, in presidencies of EU, and if we shall have some kind of clear strategy, what we can achieve during each presidency. So I hope that our dream to have, at least 3 most advanced countries, coming closer to what we call, beginning of the Western Balkan road, as before the end of this decade, that would be, our major ambition fulfilled.
Mr. Andrius Kubilius, thanks so much for sharing your perspective and expertise on indeed this very important geopolitical question of the EU's Eastern Partnership strategy. As we finish the interview, as we've done with many of our other EPP family leaders, we'd like to ask you a more personal, more informal question to help our viewers get to know you a little bit better. Our team has just made a video of book recommendations, which we've gotten from all of our many different leaders, and we'd like to ask you if you might add to that. And that is, my understanding is you're an avid reader. Is there a book you could recommend to our viewers?
Good question. Of course, always I like the books, the last ones which I read, So one book I would recommend, it's, the book which I read, was Henry Kissinger on China. China is becoming really an important topic. But for all my colleagues in Eastern Partnership region, I'm always recommending one of the book which I read quite many years ago, back in 1990s. And for me, it explained a lot about how democracy will develop in my own country, Lithuania, after we got independence. And that was Samuel Huntington, the famous Samuel Huntington book on, first of all, so-called book, which was called Third Wave, about democratization, global democratization. Another one was Political Order in Changing Societies. That explains a lot about, how democracies are developing in all the different regions, almost with what they call, Huntington iron law. Everything is repeating everywhere in a very similar way. You can see, first enthusiasms and some kind of dissatisfactions, and other things are coming into reality, and that can explain a lot of things which we see now also in Eastern Partnership region. But Huntington ends with quite an optimistic view. The third wave of democratization is over, but the fourth wave will come. That's the only question is when it will come.
Well, that note of optimism is probably a good note on which to end. So thank you for the excellent recommendations. Mr. Andrius Kubilius, thank you so much for the work that you've done on behalf of the EPP. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Okay, thanks a lot, and good luck.
To all of our viewers, thanks for tuning in to this episode of EPP Family Talks. Please join us again next time. We'll be speaking tomorrow, Friday, June the 12th at 2 p.m. with Mr. Maxime Prévost, Mayor of Namur, Belgium, and the President of our EPP member party from Wallonia, CDH. Have a great day and see you then.